Welcome to Music Outlook LA, the podcast which highlights the independent artist, whether they are a musician, vocalist, actor, actress, live audio or in-studio engineer, or a videographer, photographer. I'm your host, Will Kimsey. Each episode, we'll look at the gigs of the independent artists, from the venues we play to how we set up and break down, the gear we use and why we use it, and the info we hope you'll find useful as we all make our way in the entertainment industry. Music Outlook LA is brought to you by Kim Z Entertainment LLC. Go to kim-zentertainment.com to find out what they're doing for the independent artists. Kim Z Entertainment LLC. Independent entertainment done independently. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is Albert Lanier, Al Lanier. He's a writer, former film reviewer. He's host of a podcast that's called Outside the NFL. Check it out. I saw a little bit of it. Didn't get a chance to watch all of it, but I did see some of it. He's also got another podcast out there on YouTube called The Final Cut, where he reviews films. One of the last posts that he did was for one called The Last Days of Sheila, I believe, and Raquel Welch is in it. It's an older movie from the 70s. I think you'll pretty much like it. He's also a retired freelance journalist, ghostwriter, and even though he largely focuses on film, he likes to do writing jobs about the film industry. He's a former film reviewer, as I said, and film critic and journalist, and he's covered film festivals for over 15 years, local newspaper starting out there, and then doing a website known as Ain't It Cool News. So he's also got something I'm going to ask him about. It's called the dual story structure, which he has intended to be taught as a seminar and a workshop, which is on one of his websites that I will give you the information for in the credits at the end of the show. So, with that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, this is Al Lanier. How you doing, Al?
I'm fine, and thank you for that rather effective intro.
Oh, you're welcome.
I like that. Nice lead-up, nice transition.
Thanks. Well, I figure it's important for the people to know as much as they can about you. This is a show about independent artists, and I will talk to a best boy or a gaffer sitting on a movie project. I'll talk to the cameraman. I will talk to not just the musician, but anybody who's out there who's doing it on their own, who's not going through the big machine or is going through the big machine and wants to give information to anybody who's trying to navigate through that world. So, hence Music Outlook LA. I talked to a previous guest, and they and I gave them the explanation of why I chose the name Music Outlook LA. And simply put, remember the clipper ships from back in the day?
Yes, I do.
Be sailing, and the crow's nest at the top. It's also known as an outlook.
Oh, nice.
I had to look it up to find a name nobody took.
Music Outlook.
Yes.
Yeah, that's kind of that has a nice kind of, as a professor I had in college once said, verbal energy to it.
Yeah. If I weren't a musician, I'd be an English teacher.
Really?
I love multiple syllabic words and things of that nature. So there you go. Literature, everything. So
well, that's good to hear. That is extremely positive to hear.
Oh, thanks. Well, I mean, musicians.
I hopefully it will be fortuitous for this activity.
See, now you're being very extrapolative. There we go. Musicians are either well versed in the English language for being lyrics, of course, that I find that I've met,
The songwriters, right?
Yeah, or they're mathematicians,
Oh, really?
great
I,
accounting.
oh, that's right. Beat.
Yes,
Yeah,
they have to keep.
I took piano in high school, so that
Hmm.
was about the only instrument that I went near in terms of music.
Right.
So piano. So yeah, keeping, and also if you're like a if you're like somebody who's a session musician,
Hmm.
especially if you're a drummer, you got to be able to keep time.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly. I've played in
precisely.
bands all over
Mhm.
LA and
Mhm.
some on the East Coast in Boston. And you got to be able to do that. You have to be able to do that. That's why I love what I do. I'm
Mhm.
currently playing in a band now, and the drummer and we've known each other for years. Known all the other guys for years too. But we kind of have this thing. We lock in together on beat and timing and things of that nature. So yeah, that is a skill you got to have. You either are good at English or you're good at math. That's just the ones I've met. There's others that I know who are scientists. So go figure that one.
I've heard of that. I've heard of one guy who was rock musician. I think he got like a PhD in astrophysics or something.
Oh,
So it was interesting. Yeah,
I think
I
he's
think
out here at Caltech.
yeah, it may have been. I think it was a PhD. I know he had a degree
Right.
in physics or something.
Yeah,
So
there's a
it
guy.
was very interesting.
Yeah, we can. I can find that because I do remember seeing something about that. He did some seminars and all of that, and that's just the way it is with us. We do different things. Some of us do the music on the side. Others of us, like me, do it as a top priority. So there you
Right,
go. But
right,
let's
right.
go right on into you because
Mhm.
enough about me because I could go on forever. Um,
Well, yeah, I'm like that. I don't mind talking about other people. I've
there
done it
you
for a while,
go.
so
There you go. All
I'm
right.
fine. Yeah.
So let's talk about what your early beginnings.
Mhm.
So what inspired you to pursue a career in journalism and writing?
Basically, being out of work.
Ooh.
That was it. To be honest, I
Uh-huh.
actually, at the time, I graduated from college. I was
Mm-hmm.
out of work, and my first job was actually in radio because I had done
Okay.
radio in college, done news.
All right.
For another station, for a radio station on another campus of the
Right.
University of Hawaii system, because I'm from Hawaii originally.
Right. Right.
And so I went to another campus. I was at the campus radio station for during my junior year, and I did news. So
Mm-hmm.
I basically was the anchor for the newscast there. And
Right.
then I didn't do radio my senior year, graduated, and then I went on looking for work.
Mm-hmm.
And uh, basically, to be brutally honest, my timetable, I studied English, studied
Right.
literature in
Mm-hmm.
college. So I actually was looking to be a novelist and short story writer. That was
Right.
the point.
Right.
That was the track I was on because that was the education I basically was getting.
Right.
So I guess I was of the old fashioned school where you try to shape a career from what your education is.
Same here.
When you're educating
Mm-hmm.
yourself for a career.
Right.
So what happened was I'm out of work. The first job and really the only job I got until I 9 to 5 job I got was basically doing radio. So I was a board operator. I was playing oldies rock music. So I was at oldies rock station,
Mm-hmm.
and I was looking for radio jobs. I was looking for board up jobs. Wasn't getting any, and I got the idea to freelance. I don't. It's sort of like, I mean, it should be on a Netflix show because it's an unsolved mystery. I don't know why I thought about freelancing. I really don't. I have no idea. I knew nothing about freelancing. I knew journalism because I had done it a little in college and I had done mostly in high school. I was on my high school newspaper. But yeah, I couldn't tell you why I had decided to freelance because I knew nothing about freelancing. But I went and I started cold calling. so to speak. Called up newspapers, called up magazines. Didn't know what I was doing. This was, again, I started in 1994 when I was 24, and
Hmm.
I want to say that although I intended to be a writer, obviously a novelist, short story writer, I had a timetable, and my timetable basically was I'll go get a crappy job or whatever job, office, whatever, or I'll do journalism if I can do it. But I'll do that for a few years. And by the time I'm 28, 29, I'll quit. I'll have some money saved up. I'll be writing manuscripts and I'll probably get published by 30. That was my timetable. Well, that timetable went out the window. So what I ended up doing was becoming a writer, full stop, and a freelance writer when I was 24. So I didn't see myself writing at 24. I didn't. That's why I wasn't thinking about it. I was thinking of getting a radio job. So it really came down to work. I was out of work, needed to work. I got this idea to freelance, knew nothing about freelancing. Went and started cold calling, calling up publication, took a phone book, went down the phone book, called up publications, and I managed to, I guess, pitch an idea for an article to one, and then pitch another idea to another, and that article sold, and that article sold, and by the time 5 years later, I'm a freelancer. I'm deciding should I continue to do it because the original idea was to do a 5 year, kind of like Star Trek and the USS Enterprise 5 year mission.
Right, right, exactly. I am a Trekkie. Just to
Ah, totally.
just to let you know, I'm a Trekkie from since I was 5 years old. My brother turned me on to it.
I can't recall for me, maybe 7, 8, maybe 9.
Yeah,
I used
yeah,
to watch the original series
right, right.
when I was a kid. Come home from school and I watched the original series,
Same
which
here,
was really
same
good.
here. Um, I'm in my late 50s. I'll be hitting 60 soon, so I'm in the group. I'm in the group of another age.
Mhm.
So I was that kid too who, as soon as we came home after the cartoons were over and the homework was done and you eat dinner, for us here in LA, Star Trek would come on late at night, and sometimes I'd have to sneak
Yeah.
on to watch it because of how late it came on, or wait for my brother, who was also a Trekkie, to recap the episode. And then it might have come on Saturdays as a rerun. But yeah, I've seen every iteration of Star Trek, literally every one of them, whether I liked them or
Oh,
not.
okay. Yeah, yeah. That
Um,
was pretty much the way. It's pretty much largely been the way. I haven't caught up on all the Star Trek iterations, as you call it, series
mhm,
as I call it, but
yeah,
I certainly got to see all the movies. I would
yeah.
go to the first day. I've been doing that since Star Trek 3.
All right.
Yeah,
Okay.
first day, but going the first day of the Star Trek movies. So that was
Right.
'84 when Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock came out. So
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much
So your 5 year
lifelong fan.
mission turned into a pretty good career in journalism, writing,
Mhm.
and ghostwriting as well, as I see on your bio.
Yeah.
So we managed to cover your educational influence, which, as you said, crappy job.
Well, I thought I was
um,
going to have a crappy job. I thought I was going to have to get a regular, you know.
like a lot of us, a regular
Yeah,
nine to
that's
five.
right. That's what I assumed. That's what I
Yeah,
assumed. And I've been fortunate that way. I've never had a full time job.
right,
Never.
right.
I had a part
Um,
time job in radio, but and even that I liked it. I mean, I wasn't making much money, but I
uh-huh.
liked playing oldies rock music, Beatles, Stones, Doors, a lot of good stuff. So
Yeah, I'm
that's
in a
really
band, and some of the covers that we're doing are from
helped.
that.
Yeah.
We're doing Money, That's What I Want.
No,
We're covering a Doors song, and all of a sudden the name of it slips my mind.
Mhm.
Um, I'll email you what all the some of the songs that we're doing in that band. But we do everything from '60s rock up to uh, '80s R&B. We're covering both of the Romantics hits,
Oh, good.
"What I Like About You" and "Talking in Your Sleep."
Good
We're
stuff.
covering the Sonics, "Shot Down." Uh, you ever hear of them? They're a rock band out of Seattle. They've
Uh,
actually influenced a number of people from the day. I'll send you something about them. They're a pretty interesting group.
yeah,
Right up.
I lived in Seattle in the '90s, so I mean, you know, besides Nirvana, I'm aware of a number of bands that came out of Seattle, but that one I
Right.
hadn't heard of.
Yeah, the Sonics. They're in the mid 60s. And we do a
No.
song of theirs called Shot Down. It's basic blues. Uh, check it out. I think you'll like it. But we
Mhm.
talked about your education, freelancing, and so forth. Let's jump right into the criticism of film.
Mhm.
Um, so, what motivated you to shift your focus toward film analysis and criticism? Because obviously you had a pretty good career in journalism and then you retired. So after that, if I have the
Mhm.
timetable right, you went right into film analysis and criticism. Tell us about that.
Well, actually, I didn't go right into film analysis criticism. Let me back up a little.
Mm-hmm.
When I was a freelance journalist and writer, which I was for 22 years, that was the length of my career. I had been a film reviewer and critic for about 8 years. As you had mentioned in the intro, I was a contributor to a website, film website called Ain't It Cool News,
Right.
a rather well-known, infamous site.
Mm-hmm.
And I was covering film festivals in my hometown of Honolulu,
Mm-hmm.
um, and that would be the Hawaii Film Festival. Um, and there were a couple other smaller ones that I had done. So I did that during my career. And then I stopped reviewing movies and covering festivals in 2010.
Okay.
I retired from my journalism career and my freelance career in 2017. And so it had been a number of years since I got out of reviewing movies, going to festivals, covering festivals as press, and so forth. And what happened was in 2019, I made the decision that I wanted to come back to writing about film.
Right.
But I didn't quite execute that because at the time, after I retired in 2017, I wound up, which was February 2017, I formally retired from my career
Mm-hmm.
as a journalist, as a freelancer. In April, I started a blog on a site called medium.com. And the blog was about media and current events, news.
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote that blog for about 4 years, at least 4 years. And it was during the time, you know, and I ended the blog in, I think, officially in 2022. My last blog entry, my last blog piece was 2021, November 2021. And I had thought about in 2019, I actually made the decision that I wanted to come back to writing about film because I had stopped being a reviewer and a critic in 2010. But I didn't go through with it primarily because I was writing a blog. And what I found when I retired was that I stopped multitasking. In other words, I had to multitask, I had to do different things to get things done. You know, you got to get this article done before I do the laundry. That happened to me sometimes. So I had to be able to get stuff done all the time. And once I retired, I had time. Time wasn't a premium. It wasn't limited. Time was like the Mary Tyler Moore theme song. It was all around me, which doesn't seem right from a physics standpoint, maybe. But let's just go with it. That's what I'm thinking, or scientific standpoint. So
Okay.
time was all around me, or at least I had a lot of time on my hands, which still doesn't make sense, but it's an expression. So I had a lot of time, and so I didn't have to multitask, and so I did it. So I would do basically a thing at a time. I do a project at a time. So I was working on that blog on medium.com. I thought about doing a film blog, but I didn't want another blog. I was already writing this blog. I didn't want to do another blog. So I put it off, but I started doing analysis about film on podcasts and radio shows. I went on a show called Close Watch. And people want to check out my analysis there, they can. It's called CLOSE Watch, WATCE. TCH, Close Watch. I think it used to be called Crooked Table. And so I analyzed Eyes Wide Shut, Stanley Kubrick's last film. I analyzed Mulholland Drive, David Lynch's film, and I analyzed Airplane, the Zucker brothers and Jim Abrahams film. So I've done that on those, and I've done some analysis of other films. Broadcast News, I think, was one, and a few other films on some other podcasts, right? So I started doing analysis of films 2019 on podcasts, on shows. And finally, in 2024, I started Final Cut, which is my newsletter on Substack. Substack, of course, is a writing platform. And I decided I was going to go ahead and finally get back to writing. And that's what I've done. So my newsletter there is really about different kinds of film content. I don't like the term content, but I'll use it for purposes here.
Yeah.
So, you know, I have analytical essays. Like I have an analytical essay about Quentin Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs called Dishonor My Thieves. I have an analytical essay about William Friedkin's film To Live and Die in L.A.
Right.
And I also have essays, other essays, what I call general essays, one about covering film festivals called My Favorite Year, and also film reviews. But these are not first run film reviews. These is what I call retro review, where I go back, where I go and review movies from the past. And that was done deliberately because I didn't really want to do reviews because I'd already reviewed movies. I already covered movies. So I wasn't looking to do that. I'm open to being a reviewer again. So if somebody wants to hire me to review movies, hey, I'm open to it. Let's make a deal. You can contact me and let's make a deal. But retro review is solely with the purpose of not simply reviewing movies that are not only old but not as well known to people, but also promoting really good movies that people may not be aware of. So as you mentioned, actually the name of the movie was The Last
of Sheila. Yes.
Right.
Okay.
And so that is with Raquel Welch. So if you're a Raquel Welch fan, I tell you to check that out. And that's an intriguing movie. It's a kind of it's a murder mystery. It's kind of a subversive murder mystery in terms of its structure. Very good movie. And I highly recommend it. And so that's what you find on my newsletter, Final Cut, which is on Substack. So it's different kinds of content, analytical essays, general essays, and the film review section. And I think I had a photo album there also feature. So the return to film happened last year. I started Final Cut April 2024. And that, of course, led to my podcast, which also has the same name, Final Cut.
Right. I was going through some of your content on YouTube, and I came across, and this was a question I was going to ask until I came across that content, which was, had you ever done any movie reviews of music-based films or documentaries like Clint Eastwood's Dexter? I think that was it. I know it was about Dexter Gordon because Clint plays a little jazz piano. Matter of fact, his son is
Bird?
in the industry. He did Bird, I think.
Yeah,
But
he
he
did
also,
Bird.
but I know he did Dexter. I do remember
really?
that one. It was a picture of him, and the background was blue, and that I don't know why that picture just stands out in my head, but it does. But then I saw that you did a deal on Sam Cooke.
That's right.
And I was intrigued by that one. I didn't get to finish listening to the whole thing, but that did answer my question to some degree. It's like, I didn't know that about Sam.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was quite interesting, that entire deal. Folks, check that out. I will again give you the information to the YouTube page where I saw that, his YouTube page, and that'll be in the credits.
Right.
And I'll do that. But yeah, that I like your work is what I'm getting to.
Oh, thank you.
I
Yeah,
really do.
I used to have on my YouTube page, on my YouTube channel. That's my official YouTube channel. The
Right.
name of my official YouTube channel is Writer Albert Lanier. I think it's Writer Albert Lanier
Yeah.
at 3434.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my official YouTube page. People want to check it out, they can. I use YouTube primarily for promotion and marketing. So I don't do content. I'm not a content creator. I am just promoting and marketing my podcasts, primarily the Final Cut podcast. And also, I did a series when I was a content creator. I did a series called Looking Into, which you're probably referring to. And Sam Cooke was one of the people that I had done. It was short form true crime because I wanted to experiment with doing something different. At the time, I was analyzing true crime shows. I'm not true crime shows, but analyzing true crime cases,
Right.
which was interesting. That really came about because I was supposed to go on a podcast to talk about another subject,
Mm-hmm.
and the host didn't want to talk about that subject. And I said, well, what do you want to talk about, or what are you interested in talking about? And he said, well, true crime's hot, that's interesting. And I didn't know true crime from a hole in the ground, to be honest with you. I didn't follow that. I mean, I just thought the name of it, true crime, as opposed to what, false crime. I don't get that. But I went ahead, and there were a couple of cases that I was familiar with, that I had read about or was familiar with. One was the death of Natalie Wood. The other was the death of Bob Crane. And so I did an interview about the death of Bob Crane, and that led me to do some other cases. And one was Sam Cooke. So I was on a few shows dealing with Sam Cooke because that case really, his death. Well, he was an interesting guy as a singer. I mean, he was a virtual hit machine. I mean, I've rarely seen a recording artist who was a hit machine like Sam Cooke. Like everything he did seemed to be gold. I mean, it could have been literal gold in terms of albums, but it probably was, but gold or possibly platinum or what have you. But Sam Cooke was really a rather interesting and astute businessman, musical entrepreneur, and his death was kind of. I hadn't been aware of his death previously, and I knew something wasn't right here. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, there have been documentaries about it and everything. And then there's the music side of it with Abco Records and Alan Klein as manager, which I won't go into here. But
Right. Right.
uh, I mean, you were talking to me about musicians being either into literature or writing or into math or being scientists. It seems to me that a number of musicians should be lawyers, the way the music industry works.
Yeah, there are a
Um,
number of them. I think there are a number of copyright attorneys, music and entertainment attorneys, basically, who either currently, excuse me, are musicians or were musicians at some point. So they went on ahead and got into the business from that standpoint.
right.
Um, we tend to be geniuses in our own right, if you will, and you know we do a number of things to do what we love. We love being musicians. Um, there's a definition on a T-shirt I have for a musician: someone who spends $5,000, buys $5,000 worth of equipment to load into $1,000 car to drive 100 miles for a $50 gig.
I think I've heard that expression. Yeah, I've
Yes,
heard that. Right.
you
Well, for
know,
me as a freelancer, if I had to make a slogan, the it would be a freelancer should be somebody who, in my case, I'll use me as an example, who spent $20 for equipment and turned it into $600 worth of profit in
I
the first
like
six
it.
months. Yeah.
Very good.
Oh,
I
I
like it.
mean, that's pretty much what my story was as a freelancer. I
Uh-huh.
spent about $20 or near $20. I guess you could call it startup capital in regards to it. And by the end of that year, because I started in August of 1994,
Hmm.
by the end of '94, a few months later, I'd made something close to $600-700 from writing gigs.
All right.
So yeah, I was already in the black.
Right.
I was
Right.
already in the black, and I wasn't a full year into freelancing. That's why I was a freelancer for 22 years.
There you go. You
That's what I've
saw
been doing.
something, you had a niche, and you continued it.
Mhm.
That's more than just commendable. I'm glad it turned out well for you to be able to do it for 20 years.
Yeah,
Um,
like I said, I was looking to be a novelist, short story writer. I never
mhm,
got to be a novelist. Never got to be a short story writer, but I did get to be a writer. Got to be a journalist. Got to be a writer. So
right. Um,
yeah.
you said when we were talking back and forth through email that there was something you wanted to promote, which goes into the future endeavors. Why don't you tell us about the upcoming project you're working on?
Okay. I assume that you're referring to dual story structures.
Yeah, because I was going to ask you about that. What is a dual story structure?
Well, dual story structure is basically two structures in regards to writing scripts, which is interesting
Hmm.
because I admittedly, while a professional writer, am a writer of articles. I've done ad copy once or twice. I've done other kinds of material. I am not a professional screenwriter by definition.
Hmm.
I've never had to produce screenplay. I'm not a professional TV writer. Never had produced television scripts. So I I do have a background as a film critic and reviewer. I do have a background as a writer. And so what happened was I was looking at I think it was a film channel on YouTube called
Hmm.
James Whale Bake Sale. And I was looking, which I like to watch from time to time. And a couple of things came together. I'm on Twitter. I'm on what you would call film Twitter,
Hmm.
also horror Twitter. Love horror Twitter. It's great. And I was responding to what someone had said about the Marion Crane character in Psycho. And it was like, oh, well, she stole the money. And I thought, yeah, that's a nice little cheap way of getting her eventually to the Bates Motel. And I was thinking, well, I'm analyzing story here. I'm analyzing the script, which I never gave much thought to when I was a reviewer. Script, screenplay was just one element of a film that I looked at. So the next thing I was thinking of, then all of a sudden I thought about a gig I had done as a freelancer. I covered something called the Student Film Festival in Hawaii, or in Honolulu specifically. And part of that day, I don't know, I think it was a day or so, part of that was a course on screenwriting. It was the only course I took, but I took it as part of um, covering this festival, covering this, doing the story. And it was taught by a guy called Ty Holler at the Vancouver Film School. And what he did was he went through the basics of screenwriting, the elements of screenwriting, by showing a movie because we were in a multiplex theater, and he screened the movie The Short Thing with John Cusack, good comedy,
Hmm.
and went through protagonist, antagonist, and climax, denouement, all these things. And I had learned dramatic writing, I think, when I was in college, but so that was the only screenplay or screenwriting course that I technically took. So when I thought about the screenwriting course that I took, and I thought about what I was thinking about. All of a sudden, the idea for dual story structures happened. Again, I wasn't looking to create anything in regards to screenwriting. Wasn't my interest. I'm not a screenwriter by profession. I'm not a TV writer. So I got the idea, and so it's basically two structures: structure A and structure B, that you can use as a kind of narrative exoskeleton when writing scripts. So it's part of the screenwriting process. And my essay can be found on that. It's an intro essay to it. The reason why it would be taught as a workshop is because a friend of mine who's a filmmaker, who I've interviewed on my Final Cut podcast. She's called Allie B. It's her name. I had promised her that I would do a workshop because I didn't get to go out to her film festival. She had started a film festival in Las Vegas, and I didn't get to go out and do that. I was too busy working on Outside the NFL, my podcast, and doing some other things. I wasn't able to get out there. But I did. But she was telling me about what she was doing with her festival and workshop. I said, yeah, I'll do a workshop. And then when this idea came along, I thought, well, this would make for a good workshop. And that's why it's a workshop. So it's called Dual Story Structures. And it's really meant to be taught as a workshop and a seminar to people who are I think beginning screenwriters or something. Like you have to know the basics of screenwriting before you get into it. And if people are interested, they can contact me via email. And if things work out, I can do a tour about it. I mean, again, for me, I'm approaching it as a writer. So this is all about being a writer, professional writer.
Hmm.
I'm not approaching it from any other perspective. So I can't tell you how to sell your script. I can't tell you what deals to make as a screenwriter. I can't tell you, there are no rules and regulations here. It's just a structure for your scripts or structures for your scripts.
Right.
So I'm not going to tell you what your protagonist should have. Should it be a likable protagonist? Should your antagonist be wholly unlikable? Um, should you only have so many scenes? Should you only, should you only write 90 pages or 120 pages or what have you? No rules or regulations, just structure. And that's what it's ultimately about. So if people are interested in setting up workshops, I can do standalone workshops. I can do seminars, wherever. I can do it at schools, at colleges and universities, um, and film festivals. If people are interested, they can contact me via email. My email, of course, is at Imperious Reader. I think it was, no, sorry, imperiousreader@gmail.com. So yeah, that's if they're interested. But my intro essay is available on Dual Story Structures at my Substack, which is allanier.substack.com.
Okay. All right. I'll put all of that in toward the end in the credits, and I'm also going to make sure that it shows up, if you will, for those techie people. There will be some banners flying across the screen that I will put in with that information. So I've got it here. I'm going to be putting it in there for you. Um,
Okay.
so in doing the structure, and for a musician, that's basically theory, you know, how to
Right.
make chords and what notes you can mix and match with them and that kind of thing. Uh, there was a saying when I was in college, music has rules that are meant to be broken. So
Mm.
once you learn what the rules are, you know how to break them if you choose to, because it's a
Mm.
creative process. But with doing the structure, um, have you ever taught any of your students or worked with them or told them about any applications, programs, and the like to help them with their writing?
No, like I said, this is brand new. So I haven't really, I haven't really, I haven't really done that. No,
Right.
I haven't gone into programs or apps or anything like that.
Hmm.
Um, it's really, like I said, dual story structure is really part of the writing process.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, because I know a few people who are getting into it and they've used various programs. And one thing they've told me, um, and I even took a course in some screenwriting, basically just some
Mm.
tips and tricks on how to get your project out there as similar to what you do, the elements of it, antagonist, protagonist, and the instructor had what he called, and forgive me, but he had like, once you get to the climax, you have to have an oh shit moment,
Mm.
you
Right.
know, right. And one of the people I was talking to mentioned some program, but I say that to talk about or to just point out that when you finally get to the part of the script and you're about to submit it, there is a format that it has to be submitted in. And
Mm.
that's where the programs come in handy so that when you get ready to send it out or present it to whatever producer, filmmaker, what have you, the script does have to look a certain way. It has to be in a certain format, which was why I was asking the question. This
Right,
person was telling me that, oh, once you have everything done, basically, in layman's terms, once you have the meat and potatoes put in there, you got to put it in a certain structure to present on paper. The script has to look a certain way. So
right.
there you go.
Exactly.
Um, this has been a very interesting conversation, and we managed to just cover just about every single one. And there's two things I want to close out with here. The show is Music Outlook LA, gigs, gear, and info, and we've covered pretty much the first two in some way. Um, and the info I like to get to is for the young people that you do work with that are aspiring to do any type of journalism, freelance writing, no matter what, whether it's fiction, nonfiction, whatever, um, or like they do in your case, the film critic industry, what have you. What advice would you give to even the young people, older folks, anyone starting out? What advice would you provide to someone considering a career uh, in this genre?
Well, I was a part-time film reviewer and critic because I was a full-time freelance journalist and writer. So one of the things I would say to anybody, even though I was a film critic and reviewer for about 8 years, one of the things I would say is the it seems like things have changed because I basically was a reviewer and critic from about 2002 to 2010. And it seems to me since 2010, it's a whole different world. So, because you now have reviewers on YouTube who are, to me, are nothing of the sort. And you don't have you still have film critics, but you also have movie influencers or fluencers. You have movie talkers. You have all these online personalities who are just that, who to me sound like they have multiple personalities. And what you have are really a lot of people who are not professional, who are not structured, who are not geared, and frankly, not educated in film, talking about film. They had no business talking about film and shouldn't be talking about film. So, if you're going to get into film reviewing and film criticism, number one, actually be a film reviewer and criticism. Don't be an influencer, don't be a TikTok person, because those people are basically bought by corporations anyway. They're bought by the studio. They're basically bought and paid for. They're basically minions as far as I'm concerned. Which being a reviewer and critic, you could never be. I know because I was a journalist, I basically had to abide by ethical standards, and a lot of these so-called YouTube reviewers and influencers and TikTokers, to me, are have no ethics as far as I'm concerned. Anything goes as far as they're concerned, and they're basically paid for by the majors, by the major studios. And the major studios are smart. They figured out the game. When I was writing for Ain't It Cool News, the internet was a new area for the major film studio, and they really just didn't know how to deal with it, I think, or tackle it, because it was eating into the whole test marketing aspect of movies. And I think what the studios did was they found a way to incorporate it like corporate entities always do, and that is by bringing the internet people along and basically giving them a few shekels, giving them a few pounds, giving them a few bucks to, and flying some out to premieres and having them interview some of their stars and having them hype up their films. And certainly, I wasn't in a position like that because I was a journalist who had to abide by ethical standards. Not a paid for, not a paid and bought PR
Individual. Right.
and flat for the studios.
Right.
So one of the things I would say is, first of all, you should be educated if you want to be a film reviewer or a critic. I assume you should have a bachelor's degree or DS degree or anything, even some kind of degree, even if it isn't related to film or film studies or communications or what have you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, Literature would also help, that you write. Secondly, you're educated. Secondly, you're also educated about movies. So you know something about not only just filmmaking, but also about movies themselves,
Right.
and about different kinds of film. And so you can talk intelligently and it more importantly analyze intelligently movies and films. Um, and third, that you're promoting the right kinds of movies and the right kinds of films,
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to seek really good films as opposed to promoting, you know, hyper budgeted and overproduced crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I would say those three aspects, those are important in regard to it. Look at the critics of the past. I met Roger Ebert years ago. I knew him a
Mm-hmm.
little, and I interviewed him a number of times when he came to the Hawaii Film Festival.
Mm-hmm.
So he's a good person to look up. I would say other film critics like Pauline Kael, Andrew Saris, they were rivals, but and read other film critics of the past. James Agee, I would absolutely recommend. Dwight McDonald, again, I would recommend those critics in the past because they were important. They were important arbiters of taste. And that's your job as a film critic and as a reviewer. You're an arbiter of taste.
Right.
That's really important.
Exactly. So I just wanted to wrap this up. That is very interesting. We could continue on and on with this,
Mhm.
but I do have another guest I do have to get
Right.
to within the next few
Absolutely.
minutes.
Right.
So wrapping
So,
it up, last question I ask all my guests is a musical question. When you're out and about, what's in your car? What do you listen to when you're going from point A to point B? We talked a little bit about some of the rock music, the Beatles and such. What else do you listen to?
well, it's funny. I don't drive really, but in terms of music I like to listen to, it varies. I've gotten
Mhm.
back into listening to more classical music,
Right.
primarily looking at clips for the movie Amadeus.
Oh, the great movie. I
So
love it.
yes, wonderful movie. So Mozart to a certain extent, Beethoven sometimes. Um, I like. I'm a fan of Glenn Gould.
Hmm.
So I've listened to him, not only in terms of Bach, but not recently. I don't know if I listened to this recently, but in the past, I liked his Goldberg variations. Um, I would say also I'm more into the music that you play, like so what recently have I looked into? So what I primarily do is I go to my YouTube music on my phone and I'm listening
Hmm.
to music from the past, the 80s,
Right, right. I'm
from
a
the
big
70s.
80s fan, my darn self. It's a lot of stuff out there. We're gonna have to continue this on another time. We haven't even touched or scratched the surface of what this man does. Very interesting individual.
So let
Yeah,
me
go ahead,
just
go ahead.
put this out before I do it. I just finished outside the NFL my podcast.
Hmm.
So I've been working on two podcasts, and that's really what's kept me going. That's the latest, really latest projects that I've done is that I've become a podcaster. Final Cut, which is my film podcast. I've
Hmm.
done 10 episodes of that, and I just finished Outside the NFL, which is sports podcast, 18 weeks. So I just did week 18. And I just finished my promotional video on TikTok for that. And right now, actually, the latest thing is I'm actually looking to talk about podcasting because I'm a newbie podcaster and because I've done two podcasts in the same year. So I'm
Hmm.
actually hoping to do possibly a seminar about podcasting. I think the
Oh,
tentative title right now is Pod Made America. So I'm interested in going to, you know, I'm I'm open to doing a tour about that. If people want to book me to talk about podcasting, do podcast seminars and all of that, they can go to imperiousreader@gmail.com. That's imperiousreader@gmail.com because I'm taking a hiatus from my podcasts right now because I just finished um, Outside the NFL,
all right.
which you
Hmm.
can find on Substack, the writing medium. You
Hmm.
can find that at finalcut.substack.com, which is outside the NFL. And Final Cut, you can find at allanier.substack.com. And both Final Cut and Outside the NFL can be found on Spotify. That's Spotify for Outside the NFL podcast and for the Final Cut podcast, which is about film. So check those out. And also, Pod Made America, my seminar about podcasting. That's what I'm looking to do right now. So I'm open to booking for that. People can reach me at puriousreader@gmail.com. That's IMPERIOUSREADER@gmail.com.
All right, very good. I will again be putting that in the credits at the end. And Albert Lanier, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. I'd continue on, but I've got another guest that I do have to get to, who is sitting in the waiting room right now. But ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for this episode of Music Outlook LA, gigs, gear, and info. So as I said, I want to thank my guest, Albert Lanier, and be sure to check out the show notes, as I've been saying throughout, for his contact and website information. And please, folks, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Music Outlook LA at both Spreaker.com, SPREAKER.com, and it's also on YouTube. That information will also be in the credits at the end of the show. Music Outlook LA is also available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Amazon Music, Spotify, SoundCloud, CastBox, iHeartRadio, TuneIn, and Listen Notes, the podcast search engine. And if you could do me a favor, take some time to go to podchaser.com and rate the podcast. My name is Will Kimsey, aka WK Music. Peace. This podcast is both brought to you and produced by Kimsey Entertainment, LLC. Music Outlook LA is a copyrighted broadcast of Kimsey Entertainment, LLC. The views and opinions expressed on this show are not necessarily those of Will Kimsey or Kimsey Entertainment, LLC. Any rebroadcast, reproduction, or any other use of this product without the express written consent of Kimsey Entertainment, LLC is strictly prohibited.